Welcome to another episode of Culinary School Stories, the weekly podcast that is dedicated to sharing the stories of people around the globe whose lives have been influenced, impacted, touched, and or enriched, for good or for bad, from their culinary school experience. Hi, my name is Colin Roach, and I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. You are an important part of this show, where we ask the question, what's your culinary school story? So now, without any further delay, let's meet today's guest. Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening today to another episode of the Culinary School Stories podcast, a proud member of the Food Media Network. My guest today is Ben Shelton, and Ben, I want to start right off by saying welcome and thank you for joining us today and sharing your culinary school story.
I'm so glad to be here.
Awesome. So I know we got a lot to talk about, but let's start at the beginning. Where did your love of food and cooking come from, and how did that materialize into going to culinary school?
Well, I'd have to say it all started at home when I was in high school, and I stayed at home by myself during the summers. Obviously, I had to cook for myself and prepare things, so it really started there, doing really simple things in the kitchen. Surprisingly enough, my mother and father didn't mind me cooking too much at home by myself. They thought I was responsible enough to do it. So, I just started tinkering in the kitchen and making little things and watching TV, and it just really started from there.
Great. And then at some point along the way, you said, I could make a career out of this. I should probably go to culinary school. Did you already go into the industry first and then culinary school?
No, it was a good thing and a bad thing at the time. When I was in high school, and that time of my life was starting when I needed to make a decision on what I wanted to do, it was also the same time that the Food Network was kind of in its prime. It was starting to go up, early 2000s. You had a lot of those celebrity chefs on TV.
Sure.
I always reference Emerald Lagasse because that was kind of the show we all watched at night. And, it was like, oh, I could be a chef. Yeah, I could do that. That's what I should do. I don't know what I want to do with the rest of my life, so maybe I'll go cook. And I went down that rabbit hole, so to speak, and it's where I've been stuck ever since.
Yeah, the Food Network did a lot for our industry back then. It really got
enrollment definitely went up.
Now, did you pick Johnson & Wales because Emerald Lagasse went there, or how did you pick Johnson & Wales?
I was fortunate enough when I was in high school to have a great food and nutrition teacher, Miss Smith, who had a prior student who also went to Johnson & Wales, and she really talked it up because at the time I was kind of leaning between the two, Johnson & Wales, the CIA. Obviously, Johnson & Wales in Charleston at the time was closer. So that, that's kind of where I lean towards. So, that was my push to go to Johnson & Wales. Unfortunately, that campus closed right as the Charlotte campus opened. So that's why I actually went to the Charlotte campus, not the Charleston campus, 2004.
So the campus was pretty brand new at that point, right?
Oh, it was. Yeah, everything was new. We were the first ones to cook in there.
Awesome. So did you tour any other schools, or you said, because this is in the home area, I'm just going to go to this campus?
Yeah, I don't know if they still do it or not at Johnson & Wales, but they used to have the career exploration for high school students during the summer, and you could go down there. It was like a long weekend, and you had one for culinary, they had one for pastry, they had one for hospitality. So I did that when I was a junior and a senior in high school. So my junior year, I went to the Charleston campus for pastry, and then my senior year of high school, I went down to the Charlotte campus and did the culinary one.
Right. So you got to experience a little bit of the school in advance to kind of, test the waters and make sure this was something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's great. So if any listeners are out there that are thinking about going to culinary school, one of those career explorations or one of those summer type programs where they can go and just, be a potential student for a little while just to kind of find out what it's like, maybe an option.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then you enrolled. Now take us to day one. What's going on? You getting a uniform? You getting some knife kits? Or you?
Oh yeah, you had that big like herd assembly no one really knew where they were going, but there was people everywhere that was like directing, and if you've ever been to the Charlotte campus, it's kind of almost like separate blocks there in the downtown area. So like we were constantly crossing the street, go to the library, get our books, get our knife kit, go over here, get your uniform, and they're like, oh, next day you got to have all this ready, make sure you press everything ready. And it was a big to do. It was different. I don't want to like equate it to like the military, but it kind of felt like that, where you were shoveled in and you got to go. There's tons of people behind you, and grab your stuff and go to the next station.
Well, it's kind of like basic training, right? Here's your uniform, here's your tools, so you don't get the haircut, and send you on your way.
Yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking, but it was fun. I remember the big thing was everybody was trying to figure out how they were going to hem their pants for the next week, because you get these checks, they're about, I don't know, a foot too long, because they're kind of one size fits all almost. And, they're like, oh, you got to have your pants pressed, and you got to have your pants hemmed, and nobody knew how to sew. And it was an ordeal.
That is true. They size you for the waist, but not the leg, because everybody's so different. But then they give you 24 hours. You probably don't even know where a tailor is, or would they even do it in 24 hours?
Oh, I can imagine that whoever found one that was nearby, that poor person probably had 100 kids show up that weekend to be like, hey, I need my pants.
Or if someone's listening right now that wants to go to culinary school and knows how to sew, bring your sewing machine and you'll make a mint. You could charge everybody $2-3 and
some good money there that weekend.
Now, I know some of the students that I've had in the past, they come in, they either go in the grocery store and get those Velcro things that they can make their hem with a Velcro or iron-on ones.
Iron-on ones. Yeah.
I've seen those. And I even seen some ingenious, I guess, students, or not so much, staple them.
I mean, if it's in a pinch. I mean, we all rolled them and ironed them, and we found a little sewing kit, and we put a couple stitches on each side just to keep it up, and a lot of stay flow. We ironed them really good, just to get us through that first week.
Sure. Now, how was the lineup that first week? Were they just kind of overlooking that? I mean, they check your fingernails?
They drilled us really hard that weekend. If someone hadn't already shaved, they made sure they told you, you got to make sure that you shave. At the time, you could have a mustache. That was like the only facial hair that you could have, which I don't know if it's the same now. I mean, people wear beard guards and stuff, but when I was there, if you didn't have a doctor's note, you had to shave.
Yeah, it's all part of that sanity.
And, they really stressed the uniform then. It was really important, ironing, make sure your shoes are polished, and for me and all the other guys and ladies that were there, we kind of almost treated it like a competition amongst ourselves, who could come the sharpest.
Wow. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah. So we would always brag about certain things. So, that made it fun in a sense.
So tell us about day one. You're nervous. You got your hemmed pants, but you're there. You're meeting people for the first time. You met that first chef, first class. Were they mean? Were they nice? Did they get you on board quickly? How did that go?
Well, I lucked out a little bit because my first trimester, which I don't know if it's trimesters or not.
They just switched to semesters, but it was terms, 3 terms.
It was trimesters when I was there, but my first trimester was actually academics.
Oh.
So I had, my math, my science, my English, classes first, while a majority of my other friends were already in the lab, which I kind of, it was twofold. I didn't get to do the fun stuff the first day, but I got to kind of hear other people's stories of what they got in trouble for, or, didn't like. I almost was able to correct myself so that when I did get in the lab the first day, I was a little bit prepared. I kind of knew what to expect because I heard my roommate talk about it, because at the time my roommate, I think he did his labs first and then he did academics later. So
that's great, because they could kind of blaze the trail first and, learn it all. And then
you kind of make all the mistakes and then I don't make them. So, academics was hard too, though. I'd never been in a college environment before. And at the time, it was professional dress. So, every day you had, a collar, button-up shirt, had to wear a tie. slacks, belt, dress shoes at the time. I don't know if it's the same way still, but you had to still be presentable. You had to wear your name tag. That was a big thing. And it was still a little bit of an awakening, even in that sense, even though I wasn't in the kitchen,
Right.
being in that professional environment, almost like on the job and being scrutinized in that sense. It was fun and it was interesting.
Now, a lot of people don't know about that. They think culinary school, you just go and you cook and you make yourself some lunch and you get to eat and it's all fun. But this is, it's a full degree. It's university. So tell them maybe about something about the academic class. Were they challenging? Were they hard? Did you have a lot of work? How many people in a class? Give us a little feel of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was very challenging. I mean, you were taking college level English, math, science, but took biology. I mean, there were certain elective classes, just like in college, that you could take. I took religion, public speaking, leadership. These were all academic classes that you had to take, and they were challenging. And you had to study. You had to do homework. You had to learn MLA format, which I don't know if that's what they still have to work in now. MLA,
MLA or APA.
Yes, things you didn't really have to do too much in high school, maybe once or twice for a paper, maybe a senior year English, but now you got to do it every time you turn a paper in college. I mean, it was challenging in the sense that even though I'm not that old, I like to think I'm only 35. The technology's come so far over the last decade. Being able to print stuff then versus now. I mean, things like that, getting your paper ready, bound for an English class or for a project in biology, those were all challenging things.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you didn't have mom or dad there pushing you to do it.
Right.
Over your shoulder, making sure you're doing your work. You're with your buddies after class, and you got to force yourself to get on the computer to make sure this gets done,
How was the dorm life? You said you lived in the dorms, the residences there? I mean,
the dorm, it was a blast, I enjoyed being home. I had a great home life, but man, I was ready to be free. I've always been a free spirit. So once the time came and my parents dropped me off, they're like, "Hey, you want us to help you unpack or get settled in?" I'm like, "Nope, we're good. I can do all this."
Bye.
So it was a blast to have that sense of freedom and to make my own decisions, whether they were good ones or bad ones.
Yeah, right. Yeah, part of growing up, right?
It's all part of growing up. That's right.
Now, tell me about the lab class. Did you have a favorite? Because did you start as culinary and then go to baking and pastry? Did you go to baking and pastry all the way? I mean, how did that materialize? And why did you pick one major over the other?
I kind of missed enrollment for pastry, oddly enough. It was, I guess they had already got such a large wait list for baking and pastry that I wasn't able to get in it because I wanted to do pastry first. But I wasn't able to get in. So I went ahead and just enrolled for culinary because I was kind of teetering both anyway. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So when I was in high school, I had some cooking jobs. I never really did a lot of pastry other than what I did at home. So I did culinary first, just to see, because I had no real plan. I was just like, I'm going to go get in the role, get in the system and get started. But I did culinary first and then later decided to do pastry and then food service management. But I don't know. That's a really tough question. All the classes they were all awesome. They were all great classes. I don't think I really was in any lab that I didn't enjoy. Probably garde manger. Garde manger was a great class. You're really doing something that you may never get to do again out in the industry because it's so specialized and it's more of an art craft that's not really practiced today. But I enjoyed also all the baking classes that were there. But probably garde manger, that was probably my favorite class. I had a great instructor.
Yeah. You have a favorite instructor there? A couple of them? You want to give a shout out to anybody?
Mark Allison, which he doesn't actually work at the Johnson Wells anymore. He was the dean also for culinary arts at the Charlotte campus for a while. He was one of my favorite instructors. Chef Fred Teese, my classical French cuisine instructor. Paul Malcolm, he was my coach for the competition team. Chef Ellsworth, who was a classical French baking instructor. She's retired. And, I had a great relationship, fortunately, with all of my instructors. I didn't,
What makes them good instructors? Because someone listening might be like, yeah. Was it just because they were nice? They were easy graders? Were they just talented? What makes a good instructor in your eyes?
I think someone that you can relate to and talk to and feel comfortable talking to, but at the same time really respect because they hold themselves in a way. I think it's kind of the whole package of you can talk the talk and you can walk the walk, and at the same time you can sit down and talk to me after class and be a human being. I think those are all like really important aspects of an instructor at the end of the day. You shouldn't be so afraid of me that you can't talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
Should still at the end of the day, heed and respect my word when I give you advice.
But you felt like they have your back. They're there to support you. They want you to succeed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you were there for a 2-year associate, then another year for the baking and pastry, and then another 2 years for your bachelor's.
Yeah, I did it in 5. Yeah. So I got my culinary degree in 2 years, and then I jumped in, did just straight labs for pastry because I had already had all my prerequisites from the academics. I did have to take one baking technology class that was like once a week. I don't know if they still offer it or not, but it was like almost like a science class that only the baking students took. And then I did my internship over the summer, so I didn't lose any ground, and I could start right in the following year in my food service management.
So tell me about culinary and baking and pastries. We kind of touched on this before when I asked you, and if someone is listening right now and they're on the fence, I mean, if they could do both, that would be best, but do you see a difference between them, obviously, in the craft?
There's a big difference between culinary students and pastry students, and I can clearly remember when I took my first baking class, Intro to Baking, I remember there was some resentment almost amongst culinary students that they felt almost like, why do we have to learn how to bake? And it's like, it's important to be an all-around good chef. You should know how to bake. And I think that's what, that's why you take it in culinary school. But I feel like, a lot of kids or students were like, I'm going to be a chef. I'm going to hire a pastry chef. I'm never going to bake. Why do I need to learn how to do this? It's like they didn't want to do it. When really, I mean, you have to learn those skill sets to be a well-rounded chef, because you never know. The pastry chef might call out tomorrow and you might be doing the dessert. So
yeah, I mean, you got to at least make a pie or make some bread.
You got to be able to make some rolls, right? A cake, a pie, a basic sauce or two. You never know. So it was at that point that I realized that there's more to it. And especially when I did the second baking and pastry class, advanced patisserie, they were still kind of grumpy. Oh, why are we having to do pastry? But I was over there really excelling, and that's when it clicked. Like, I need to be doing pastry for sure. So that really would push me to take baking and pastry.
Now, when you were with the baking and pastry students, that was their declared major from the start, no culinary. Did you see a difference in the student?
Oh yeah, I mean, for me it was easy. I was already the fish in water. I had 2 full years under my belt. I knew how the system worked. I went into the first baking lab with all green students. And I mean, it was easy for me to excel because I knew everything and I've been doing it for 2 years. So it definitely made that transition super easy, and it made it, I would say that I was able to get more out of the pastry program because I had already did culinary.
Sure. You have a unique perspective because you've done both.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about the little things, and I was able maybe to get the bigger picture and to grasp.
But what about the student? You said the culinary student didn't really want to do any baking and pastry. What about the baking and pastry students? Did they have the same?
Oh yeah, they were the same way. No one wanted to do the culinary. It was a very clear divide, which I don't know if they still have them. You got the blue neckerchiefs and the green neckerchiefs.
Yep.
That kind of that distinguished the two of us, and then we won't even talk about the ones that wore the red ones.
The maroon cranberry.
Hospitality students. But yeah, there was definitely a clear divide, and the only thing I can say to someone that's thinking about, maybe being on the fence of doing both, if you have the time and you can do it, you should, learn and respect both crafts equally.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you become a pastry chef or you become a savory chef, you never know, what you might be doing in the future. And in this current point in time, being very versatile, being that Swiss Army knife in the kitchen is very, I don't want to say lucrative, but it is valuable right now.
Yeah, you bring so much more to the table.
Bring a whole lot more to the table. When the pastry chef comes upstairs and breaks down tenderloins, it looks good.
Now, what about male and females? Traditionally, it's been more females in the baking and pastry, and culinary was more males, but lately we've seen a mix. But what was your experience with that?
It was, when I was in school, it was very female driven. There were a lot of girls. I was like one of two males in my first baking lab. But outside of the industry, not out of the industry, but out of the classroom, it kind of tips the other way. Once you actually get into your more higher end, heavy production, pastry shops or like casinos, hotels, I saw that it kind of tilted the other way. You had a whole lot more men in the bake shop. And I don't know why that is. But I was kind of expecting it to be more female driven once I got out into the industry, but it was actually more male. So that may change now. Maybe I only saw that little glimpse of the time when I was in school. So I don't know, but maybe there'll be a transition, and in 10 years, it'll be more female driven as those people that I went to school with take on those new executive roles. So
now, when you went to culinary school, did you get any flack, any grief from people? Like, you don't need to go to culinary school. What are you doing spending your money, waste your time? Or was it all supportive?
Oh, for sure. When I'd say my first serious cooking job in high school, I worked at the Piedmont Club in Winston-Salem. And I worked there for like a year and a half, my senior year of high school. And I did it because I wanted to get industry experience, to get a taste for what it was like before I went to culinary school and wasted a whole bunch of money, possibly. And I remember, like, right as I was getting ready to leave that spring, and get ready to go to school, all the other line cooks and people that I worked with, they're like, "Oh, you don't really need to go to culinary school. You stay here like 2 more years and you'll be fine. You don't even need to do culinary school. You're just wasting your time." And they just didn't want to have to replace the line cook.
Yeah. They'll teach you everything you know. Stay with me.
Yeah, you take care, you'll be good. You don't have to go to culinary school. But, they were really supportive in the end when it came down to it. They got me some little college goodie bags, as like a going away little gift. It was a real nice experience. But I probably caught more flack going from culinary to pastry from my buddies and friends, because at the time all my buddies were culinary, and they were either getting ready to go out into the industry or they were going to do their bachelor's, and I'm getting ready to do pastry and basically start all over. And they gave me a hard time, a run for my money, but it worked out.
Now, you did some competitions in school, too, you had mentioned. Could you tell us about that, and how important is that to someone going through school and getting that extracurricular? How does that change you or better you?
Oh, for sure. Competitions are going to really kind of show your own flaws to yourself, in a sense. It's things that you may not see on a day-to-day. When you really start competing and practicing and striving to make things perfect, in a sense, you're going to better yourself. When you add extra stress on yourself, and challenge yourself mentally or physically, you're going to get better. I was fortunate enough. I did the intercollegiate team, which is basically like the team, all the Johnson & Wales compete against one another once a year in baking and culinary. And I did the pastry one for 2 years. The 2 years up, the year I was in the pastry program, and then my first year of food and beverage. And then my third year of food and beverage, or my second technically. There's so many years, it's hard to keep track of all of them. I did the culinary because I was also a TA and a fellow. When I was a TA and a fellow, I also competed on the culinary team.
Great. So it got you to learn speed. It got you to challenge yourself, push yourself out of the comfort zone, and also, there was probably, some time there that you had to, produce in, and so it taught you, sense of.
I think I got to see all the campuses. We went to Denver, we went to Providence. It was, because every year they'd host it at a different Johnson & Wales. So, I mean, it was a great opportunity to see the other campuses, meet other students, compete. Oh, yeah, I highly recommend competition work.
Now, also, I see that you're involved heavily with the American Culinary Federation, and maybe you could speak to, certification and networking and professional organizations for someone that's getting into this industry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, especially somebody that's coming into the industry, to get your student membership, and they also have not like a novice, but like someone that's just interested in it. You don't even have to be a professional at the time to be a member of the ACF. It's a great way to network. I mean, unfortunately, right now with what's going on, it's hard to network, and it's hard to have meetings. But when this is all over with and we get beyond it, it'll be a great way for students or potential students or someone that's thinking about getting in the industry to network and meet other chefs and people that are like-minded. But I mean, with certification too, I mean, once you get done with school and you're in your career and you're in your chosen path, whether you're going to be a pastry chef or a savory chef, put your time in, take good notes, keep documentation. And when the time comes and you qualify, you should definitely get certified. It is a certified executive pastry chef, certified executive chef. I mean, even if it's some of the smaller ones, certified working pastry chef or certified executive sous chef, any certification that you may have, bringing it to the table during a job interview, it's only going to help you. I've never seen it hurt anyone.
Right.
I've never seen anyone be like, oh, I didn't get that job because I was a certified executive chef. It doesn't happen.
Now, you're the chapter president, or you were in your local area?
I am. I'm getting ready to phase out. This is the last little bit for me. I'm going to pass the baton to someone else, and I'm going to work towards some other things the next couple of years. I'm going to stay affiliated. I have to be on the board for the chapter, and I'm just going to keep trucking along with the ACF, and I want to do some my own certification. I want to get my Certified Culinary Educator. Because eventually that's where I want to see myself again, is in education.
Oh. I teach a class now. It's elective, which wasn't around when you were in school, and that's Introduction to Culinary Instruction. And it's for culinary students that are thinking about going into teaching, and they can take that as an elective class. They learn about lesson plans and assessment and evaluations and even how to do live demos, which has been pretty good. And it's elective, but those students that want to go into that part of the industry, it's been very successful.
That's awesome.
Well, good luck with that. I mean, teaching's an honorable part of the industry. So now you've been out for a while, you're working, and you have life, you've got your job, you've got children now, married. How do you keep it all together? How would you give advice to someone that, how do you get that work-life balance?
I'm fortunate enough. I met my wife at Johnson & Wales. So my wife is also in the industry in some regards. She works in student nutrition. So, I mean, that kind of helped things out a little bit. You kind of, where the other person's coming from, and they kind of understand what's going on and they can relate, because that's kind of the big thing right now, being able to relate to your partner, and explain why you're stressed or why you don't have time or whatever the case may be. But I've been real fortunate. I think there's been a really big shift in the industry over the last decade, maybe even sooner, where, I mean, those days of slaving away just aren't there anymore. I mean, people realized that if you want good people in the industry, you got to give them time to be home with their family, so I think that's a pro right now for people that are looking at getting in the industry. I think those days of the 60, 70-hour work weeks are behind us. I don't think we have to worry about that anymore. I mean, obviously during peak seasons and stuff like that, you're going to work really hard, but I don't think that you're going to have to worry about not having family time like maybe there was before. And just be patient and find the right job for you. There's lots of jobs out there. If one doesn't work, don't try to put the old square peg in a round hole. It's never going to fit. Find the right job for you, and good things will come of it.
Yeah, the industry needs to change. It's been plagued in the past with, alcoholism, substance abuse, suicides. It's been really hard on employees, and it's changing, and that's for a good thing now.
Yeah, I think it's getting better for sure.
Mm-hmm. So how do you keep yourself from getting complacent? How do you challenge yourself? How do you keep growing?
Well, that goes back to the whole certification thing earlier. Once you find yourself in that position and you've grown professionally to a level, all right, you become an executive pastry chef or you become an executive chef, to keep it from becoming mundane and going through the day to day, you have to challenge yourself. And I think you either do it with things like competition or you do it with certification. I've only recently got my certified executive pastry chef. It's something that I've always wanted to do. And now that I've done it, I'm already thinking about, well, what's the next certification I can do? Because I'd like to get the educator. And then I don't want to be too ambitious, but I think maybe one day I'd like to maybe even try the certified master pastry chef exam, because there's not a lot of them right now. So I think, having goals and being ambitious,
mm-hmm.
Is what's going to keep things fresh and new and different, because it can be very mundane. You do the same thing day in, day out.
Yeah, it could be kind of like a factory. You start producing the same stuff. You want to.
It can be, especially in baking and pastry. We pump out a lot of the simple things. A lot of people ask me, "Oh, you love working at the country club or doing this? You probably do. You do showpieces every day." No, I don't make showpieces every day. There's a lot of biscuits and a lot of pies and a lot of cakes in between those showpieces.
Yeah. That someone had a guest on one other time. They always get people, oh, you must eat the best food and have the best wine. It's like, you got me confused with the guests. I'm the worker. Yeah. I'm eating over a trash can as quick as I can so I get back to work.
We have several culinary schools in the area, locally, community college, stuff like that. And I'll get a couple of culinary pastry students come in that want to work. And they're always asking me, like, can you make me a better pastry cook or a better pastry chef? And I always tell them, I can show you how to scoop cookies better by the time you
leave. Awesome. So speaking of that, what is some advice that you would give to a young culinarian that maybe wants to go to culinary school or get into this industry and they came to you? What would you share? What would you tell them?
Yeah, you get a job. Get a job in the industry. When you're able, if you go to pretty much any restaurant or resort, club, and you go in with the mindset that you want to learn and not make money, and you tell a chef or a pastry chef this, more than likely they'll bring you on just in that regard. If you want to learn, I'll give you a part-time job. So go in, work in a kitchen, see the environment, and experience it for what it is. And don't just do one, do a couple. Work a couple different places in the area. Because if you just base your experience off of one location, that might be a bad experience and it might not have been the best choice. You might got a bad representation of the industry. So do multiple little jobs, stage, which I know you know what that word means. Go in and work at a place for a day for nothing, for free. Do something really mundane, but don't think about what you're doing. Think about what you're seeing. Don't be like, well, I had to peel asparagus for 4 hours with a green scrubby. That's not the purpose of you being there at that time to peel asparagus. The purpose of you is to see the environment and to feel it for what it is, the intensity of it, and decide whether or not this is something I would like to do every day of my life. And if it is, then good for you. Go for it.
Yeah, it provides that opportunity to look under the hood, pull back the curtain and see how it works in the back of the house. And
take a peek, to see what it's like.
Because it's definitely different than sitting as a guest in the front.
For sure. Absolutely. Every day.
So You're an influence now to your employees, your cooks, people work with you. Who growing up was an influence to you? Can you name 2, 3 influences personally, professionally, that had an impact on you and your life, your career?
Well, my mother was probably the first, hardest working person I know, and always willing to give me the opportunity, so to speak, to learn, whether it be making me do chores or wash dishes or do my own laundry. She really taught me a lot about independence, taking care of myself, making sure that which she used to always tell me, if it's worth doing, then it's worth doing right. And I still remember it. So, everything I do, I try to do as best I can do it. And if it's wrong, it's trash. So just throw it in the trash. And, I'm fortunate enough, I can't say that I've had a lot of grumpy chefs, especially starting out. My first chef I ever worked for, Chef Gabrielson, he took me on at 16 years old. He made me do a bench test. First time I ever did a bench test. Never cooked in an industrial kitchen before in my life. I go in for an interview to talk, to him about getting a job. And he's like, all right, come in the kitchen. We're going to have you break down a chicken and cook some rice and some vegetables. And I was super nervous, and I did a horrible job of it. But he was super, super cool about it. He's like, I saw that you made some right moves. You know how to chop. We're going to give you a shot. And I'll never forget that. You don't have to be the best going into the game. You just have to want to do it. And the right people will give you the opportunity. So I have to say those are 2 of the biggest mentors that really propelled me into the industry, and to make good decisions.
Great. That's great. Okay, so let's look back now. Yeah, you got some perspective. You got these years between you and culinary school. Was it worth it? Would you do it all again, knowing how much money it costs and the time and all the homework and maybe stress and everything that was in there? Was it worth it? Would you do it again? Would you make any changes?
I would continue in the industry. I do well at it. I've had a successful career at it so far. I think the only thing I might have changed is I don't think I would have got my bachelor's in food service management. I think I would have been a little bit more directional and not so broad looking back. Like, I think that the way I think and the way that I work, I would have done much better in like food science. And I think now if I could have done it over again, I would have got my bachelor's in food science. Just because, as a pastry chef, we're very precise. It's almost, people say it's a science, and to some degree it is, a science. But when I worked after culinary school for a company called Pre-Gel America, I did a lot of R&D work for them. And it was then that I realized, man, I wish I'd have got my food science degree. I could have done a whole lot more with it in the industry, with what I like to do. So you really, once you get into that second tier of your education, you really should have a better idea of which direction you want to go. So when you make that bachelor degree decision, do you want to be a manager of a restaurant, or do you want to do R&D? And I wish I would have considered my options a little bit more at that time. But I think that's probably the only thing I would have changed.
What about a master's degree or other terminal degree rather than the master chef? Spend your time going towards that and get it in culinology or food science.
I thought about my MBA because it is very versatile. And I thought about getting my master's in education if I were to pursue education down the road. In the state of North Carolina, you have to have a degree above what you teach. So if you want to teach an associate, you have to have a bachelor's. If you want to teach a bachelor's, you have to have a master's. So in that regards, if I ever did get back in education, I probably would go back to school and get my master's in education. But as far as being in the industry per se, I think certification probably holds more weight. I think if you were a certified master chef, it's going to get you farther than having your master's in food service management.
Yeah.
So I think you just have to figure out it's hard. You have to look into the future and see where you're going to be and try to make that decision now. You just never know where you're going to be at. So yeah, it's tough. You're gambling a little bit.
Yeah, different doors open, different opportunities present themselves. And did you take the right path or did you not? What about your young children now? If they came to you and said they want to be in this industry, would you encourage them? Would you sway them from it? How would you handle that?
Well, I got one, a young boy, James. He's going to be 7 on Christmas Day.
Oh.
Um, yeah, and he likes to cook with Daddy, and if it's something that he wants to do, by all means, I will help him as much as he wants, to do it. But I will make sure also that there are a lot of other opportunities for him, that he won't be just, nailed down to this one thing. He will have the opportunity to experience more than just food. Well, he's had a lot of experience in it right now. One of the things we really strived for when he was little was that he would have a good palate. There's one thing I said: he was not going to be a chicken finger and French fry kid his whole life. He was going to eat a lot of things. So, but I don't know. It'll be tough.
He must think Daddy's pretty exciting when he comes to where you work or goes to the country club kitchen or anything like that and gets to see all the action. Must be exciting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, he loves coming to the bake shop. He knows he'll get a cookie or something every time he comes in. He's like, "Where's my treat, Daddy?"
Great. What's one myth that you've heard or you'd like to debunk about our industry or about culinary school that you hear or that you want to dispel and say, no, that's not true?
I don't know. I can't say that I know of any myth that I've been able to debunk. I mean, the crazy thing about the kitchen is you're apt to see anything. And you really could see anything in the kitchen. So
give us an example. What's something crazy you've seen?
Yeah, I've seen people fall asleep on the line because they were just so exhausted. I remember in culinary school, we got caught napping in the storeroom because we stayed up too long.
Hiding in the walk-in?
Fell asleep on a big pallet of flour. Yeah, in the back. So I can't say that there's any myth. I mean, I think the big thing a lot of people are afraid of now, and it might be timid of, is just, working for a grumpy chef, working for someone that's mean. Like, I think now, I think the persona of a chef is someone that's just unhappy, ungrateful, narcissistic, just doesn't care about you. And I just don't think that's true anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, that at one time probably was the case a lot, but I think now that myth is gone. I don't think, one, you can't get away with it anymore.
Right.
HR looms above you. You got to be nice. But I haven't worked with a grumpy chef in a long time. So I think that's the big myth now, is that, I'm going to be working in a hostile environment and people are going to be yelling at me all the time. And that's just not the case anymore. That myth is over.
Right. World has changed. So let me ask you this. With Johnson & Wales closing Denver and Miami campuses next year, the Art Institutes pretty much all closed, the Cordon Bleus closing, what do you see the future of culinary school?
Well, I see it's unfortunate that it's happening. We kind of created a bubble, and that bubble did burst. I kind of chalk it back up to that time period with the Food Network. I mean, they really blew it up. I mean, they excelled that industry very quickly, and everybody wanted to go to culinary school, which was great. But then a lot of people couldn't hang per se, and the industry has the bubble has popped, so to speak, and there's just not enough jobs, and that people want to go to school to be chefs or celebrity chefs. It's not the case anymore, and there's just not the enrollment for it. I see it as an opportunity, though, for places that want to have apprenticeships. You talked about me looking back on it now, whether, if I would have changed something about going to Johnson & Wales or picking culinary school. Having learned what I learned now, I think I would have loved to have gone to the Greenbrier apprenticeship program. It's a great program for people that have already graduated culinary school, because that's one of the prerequisites. You got to have a degree from a culinary program. But there's other options out there for people, and I see it as an opportunity for the places that want to provide the apprenticeship program. For those people that really want to excel, it'll be good for them.
Great. So as we come to the end of our chat today, and before we wrap up, is there any last-minute advice or guidance or something you want to leave with the listeners, something you want to share?
I think the most important advice I can give somebody that's wanting to go to culinary school or go into the industry is to put themselves in stressful situations as much as possible. It may sound silly, but it's the only real way I feel like someone can grow. If you coast and you make your life easy, you will not develop and grow professionally. So don't be afraid to take the leap of faith. Put yourself in a stressful situation, whether it be competition, certification, going to some random job interview and doing a bench test. Make yourself uncomfortable, because that's what's really going to help you excel. Because in the industry, you'll find that you're uncomfortable a lot. And the sooner that you come to grips with it, the easier it will be to overcome those situations when you come across them in the future. And then try to find joy in it. Not all times will be joyful, not all times will be easy, but find what you like and what makes you happy and focus on it.
Great advice. So let me ask, in 2013, you won the U.S. Pastry Chef of the Year. How did you get there so fast right after graduation? That was a pretty short amount of time.
Yeah, luckily, I worked at a place, Pre-Jill America. It was just north of Charlotte in Concord. And it was a pastry and ice cream manufacturing facility. And we did a lot of R&D there. And we also taught a lot of classes there on pastry. And I had the fortunate opportunity to work with a lot of great pastry chefs. Frederic Monti, Laurent Brenlard, Stéphane Trion. We're talking like MOS from France. And in that 3 years that I was there, I had the opportunity just to learn from some of the best pastry chefs in the country and the world, because they were constantly coming in, teaching classes. And I luckily had a mentor, Frederic Monti, who was one of the more challenging pastry chefs that I've ever worked with in my life. But, for all the hard times and grief he gave me, he also pushed me to excel and to be better. And I had every resource at my disposal. If I wanted to pull sugar, Fred would say pull sugar. He might go behind me and say it looks horrible, but it was made me strive to be better. So nothing was ever good enough for him, and it was very stressful. But man, I tell you, at the end of the day, I look back on it, and if it wouldn't have been for those couple of years there working for him, being under pressure, being under stress, thinking that I wasn't going to be good enough, I probably wouldn't have been. I mean, he really helped mold and shape me into that competition platform that was needed to win that. I just had scored the perfect job at the time. And I was willing to learn and put in the time and energy. It was about a year there where I didn't take a weekend off. I basically went to work and I pulled sugar or worked with chocolate or, just whatever I could do. At the time, though, I just had got married. I didn't have any kids, and I was at that point where I could do that. And I seized that moment to really put the time in. And I had, luckily, my wife at the time to say, why are you home on Saturday? You need to be at work practicing.
Wow.
And she would basically push me out the door, like, hey, you need to go. If you're going to do this, you need to do it. So, I talk about stress, and that's one of the things, putting yourself in that stressful situation, and seeing if you'll rise to the top. That's what really will take you from being kind of mediocre, good, but mediocre, to really excelling yourself really quickly. That, and my circle was really small, and I only surrounded myself with people that did pastry. When I left work and I went and hung out with my buddies that were coworkers, we didn't talk about football or sports. We talked about pastry. I went to bed thinking about pastry. I woke up thinking about pastry. If I did a YouTube search, it was on pastry. I really just engulfed my life in it for about 3 years. And if you do that and you sacrifice that little bit of your life, you can get very good very quick. But a lot of people don't want to sacrifice that little bit of their life. They want their weekend. They want their personal time. And those are the things you kind of have to give up if you want to get good really quick.
Yeah.
But then you go back later and you have free time and you have personal time.
Yeah. So it's a total immersion, right? It's like, really time on task and just be there.
Yeah, that's the ticket, sacrifice a little bit so you can have it later.
Yeah. Well, that is just about all the time we have for this episode, and I want to first thank you, Ben, for coming on the show today and sharing your culinary school story with all of us. We really appreciate your time, your insight, and your honesty.
Thank you. It was my pleasure being on the show.
All right. Thanks again. I enjoyed our chat. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And a big thanks and appreciation also goes out to all of you, the listeners. We hope you enjoy the show and this episode. You all are a big part of this show, so please let us know what you think. Your comments are always welcome, and they help us in making the best show possible. You can email them to culinaryschoolstories@gmail.com. That's culinaryschoolstories@gmail.com. Or even leave us a voicemail at area code 207-835-1275. That's area code 207-835-1275. And if you like the show, we have a big ask of all of you, and that is to share the podcast with everyone you know and to give us a positive rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Okay, until our next Culinary School Story, take care and be well. Bye-bye. Culinary School Stories is a proud member of the Food Media Network.